Hello there, person on the internet. As you read in the title, in this video I'm going to be ranking my top 20 Souls bosses. This is a very biased list because it's purely based on my personal preference. I am not trying to make a video that is definitive and applies to everyone, and neither should you expect the video to really be. The criteria for the positions ranges from design to music to moveset to challenge, the arena in the lore, and just general enjoyability. I've played through all of the 7 games multiple times, and I've fought most of these bosses more than a dozen of times, and obviously since I really love these games, they're my favorite games, here I am going to rank my favorite bosses within them. So without further ado, sit back, get you a snack and some water and enjoy. At number 20 I have possibly the most underrated boss in the whole series, and that's Martyr Larus. Canehurst Castle is one of my favorite levels in the games, and I look forward to it every time I replay Bloodborne, which is a lot, just ask anyone who knows me. I don't know why, it's just that the vibe feels unique to Bloodborne, which is weird. But just something about this place is fun in general, and Alfred is one of my favorite NPCs. His quest about the executioners and everything is just so interesting and was so captivating. But to reach this level, go through it, suffer, and then finally make it at the top. And in one of the hardest runbacks, you meet this legend, this husk, this hallowed version of this myth you've heard of a lot, and you fight him above these rooftops in this snowy storm. It's just something about these fallen legends or corrupted figures that you have to put to rest out of respect in pursuit of your goal. FromSoft did it with Artorias, and then later on did it again with General Radan, and those two are high up on the list as well. But Martyr Larus stands out even within this category, and I have not yet just been able to put my finger on why. Number 19, however, is Soul of Cinder. See, I reordered this list so many times that this video should have came out the last month. I kept on rewriting and changing everything, and the game that caused me the most trouble is Dark Souls 3, because originally I had 8 to 9 bosses that were all trying to make it on this top 20 list. So seeing Soul of Cinder this low is fascinating, because Nameless King was dropped from the list. The Twin Princes were dropped from the list, and those are some of my favorite bosses, but the competition is just that high. Soul of Cinder, however, is just the perfect end for Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 was the second game I played, and I was obsessed with it. I did not know who Gman was. I mean, I did from few sources of lore here and there. I didn't really appreciate the plon because I have not played Dark Souls 3 at the time. So my first experience and my first encounter with the Soul of Cinder was just this entity that I knew meant a lot for the world. So just lore-wise, presentation-wise, Soul of Cinder is the most brilliant idea I've ever seen to end this series on. Dark Souls 3, a game so huge on scale and wide on variety, yet the final boss you fight is just this humanoid representation of all of the lords that came before you, including you. It's just poetic, and the fight itself is amazing. I don't want to talk about it too much, we still have a long list to go through, but Soul of Cinder is just, yeah, Soul of Cinder was amazing. But what's better than the final boss in the game is the first boss in the DLC. Demon Prince is another underrated boss, but it is possibly the best duo fight in the whole series. Like, yeah, Orphan and Small maybe did it first, and I know that everyone loves the gold skin duo, but Demon Prince by far mechanically were the most impressive and the most manageable and fair duo boss fight I've ever seen. You not only fight these two giant monstrosities, but you feel up to the challenge. It does not feel like a gang fight at all, and you yourself even have a lot of control on who is the active and the passive one, because they never are aggressive at the same time. And if you constantly attack one of them, he's going to be the one you're fighting, and the other one just acts as a secondary and range enemy. Everything about them feels balanced, and that's down to the second phase, which also gives you 2 different options depending on which one of them you killed first. Ending up with this epic final battle, and the Demon Prince himself as a creature has my favorite animations in all of the Dark Souls series. Something about its movement and its attacks and how none of them feel cheesy and stupid has always stuck with me, even though it's the first boss in the DLC, which I think is why people tend to really not even mention it, is always impressive to me. Number 17, we have General Radan. Speaking of presentation, before you even get to this man's area, the narrator himself takes a moment to give you a summary of what's going on. You find yourself in a festival and this group of warriors coming together, all for different reasons, but for the same goal, to take down this legendary figure, a man so powerful he conquered the stars. Even out of his mind, the man is still a presence. And this is all before you meet him. You get to the arena and you're met with some long range shots and some variety of arrows. The area is huge and I think is by far the biggest boss arena in the whole game, fitting for the biggest man you're going to fight. It's such a shame that it's an early to mid-game boss and he was scaled down and even really nerfed, but I would have loved it if Radan was just a little more, and I'm talking about the fighting part itself. He should have been an endgame boss, I do not care. Maybe make him a third side area, just like you fight Mog and Melenia. Radan should have kind of been his own thing over there, and just make him so hard, I do not care. But the fight itself, it's an amazing fight, obviously. His moveset is telegraphed and generally easy to dodge. You get to summon people to help you, or you can choose to fight him alone, which is easier, to be very honest. Yes, the summons can carry you and you can just spam something from a distance, but I feel like fighting him one-on-one is not only somehow more respectful, but also more rewarding. Just the idea of this man who is supposed to be taken by a group is now taken down by you, an equal, perhaps, to him. I love Radan for all the good reasons. His lore, his design, his story, and on the far end of the other spectrum, someone so sinister and devious and absolutely evil is number 16, Mog, the Lord of Blood. See, the first time I fought Mog, I was like, okay, cool boss, I guess. But the second time I fought him, I was like, alright. The third time, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Every time I fought this fucker, he somehow, I don't know, impresses me. He gets way higher. And I do not think any other boss has done that before. And maybe that's because I am someone who constantly changes his fighting style and build variety. I endorse the mechanics of Elden Ring and try absolutely everything. So whenever I end up fighting Mog, the fight itself is always a different fight. It just feels like a hard counter for most, if not everything you can throw at him, therefore making him a challenging fight every time. Just recently, I've done my first enemy and item randomizer, and I met Mog in Margit's arena. Yes, full Mog fight, the two-faced guy, the nihil guy, and I was stuck there for a long time until I finally beat him, and further emphasizing that Mog is always going to be a challenge. Are there some issues with the area denial and the constant blood and fire, and it is annoying because he keeps spamming it? Yes, I mean, there's always the option to get good and not complain, but also it just, yeah, it fits. Who said this guy is a fair fight? Who said this guy is here to fight you out of respect? He wants to kill you. Keep that in mind. And I find it kind of cool to measure a character's personality along with its moveset. This guy is the sinister, evil Lord of Blood, and his moveset really shows that. He is going to steal health from you. He is going to debuff you. He's gonna burn you and cause chaos. That's just who he is. Number 15, the best dragon fight in every game I've ever played. And of course, I'm not talking about Platypus. I'm talking about Dark Eater Medea. I did mention that Dark Souls 3 was my second game, the first one being Bloodborne. So this was one of my early encounters with a larger-than-life monster like Medea. But even to this day, and after the 20 billion dragons in Elden Ring, Medea is still Medea. This is the boss I was stuck on for the longest in Dark Souls 3, and just like everyone else, I thought attacking his legs was the right option. Spoiler alert, it was not. But figure that out and figure the intention of this boss, and you get into a dance with a monster with a lot of balanced and calculated attacks. You have to strategize, you have to stay calm even though the situation does not help. But at last, when you finally conquer him, it feels worth it. It feels worth the bridge, the earlier encounters, and the final showdown. At number 14, I have Orphan of Kos. First of all, this is the boss that killed me the most times in any video game. I counted up to 46 tries and then I lost the count. Yes, Bloodborne was my first Souls game. Yes, I usually don't really have a lot of trouble killing bosses people consider the hardest in the game. It's just a thing with me, I usually am stuck with someone like Valiant Gargoyle. Yes, I used daggers on them on my first playthrough, but still they were the boss that killed me the most in Elden Ring. But none of this or any other boss caused me more trouble than Orphan of Kos. This guy is a nightmare, and you'd expect me to really hate him and never even consider having him on my favorite bosses list. Yet here he is, because Orphan of Kos is a really good fight. It's been 7 years since I fought him, and yes, I can no-hit him now and just bully him in a lot of different ways. But more than that, he just represents something to me outside of his boss arena. Orphan of Kos was and is still the biggest victory I had in these games. And he also marks the end of Bloodborne, my all-time favorite game. Everything about that DLC, everything about the fishing hamlet and down to its final boss, this poor yet creepy and horrific creature. Figure out his rhythm and fight him multiple times, but there will always be a semblance of a challenge whenever I step on that beach. Number 13, and here is our first Sekiro boss. We have Inner Genichiro. Yes, normal Genichiro is one of my favorite bosses, but Inner Genichiro is just an upgrade, so I'll have him here instead. Genichiro is one of my favorite characters. He is by far my favorite rival in the Souls series. He has one of my favorite Japanese voice actors, and his relevance and presence in the story is just really good. You fight him at first and he's way superior. The game really guarantees that he is supposed to beat you, but we grind and we get better, and you fight him in the middle of the game, but not as an inferior nameless shinobi, but as the wolf, as Sekiro, someone who actually puts up a challenge, and he recognizes that. A 3-phase boss fight introducing one of the coolest mechanics in all of these games, which is lightning redirection. The fight itself is obviously amazing. He embodies everything that Sekiro stands for. The Sekiro has the best combat mechanics in any game. So he's not only the introduction of the system, he is also the peak of it. From Mikiri counter to fast-paced deflection, being aggressive, forcing you to be aggressive in order to push him back. He has a bow, he pushes forward and runs around. And when you beat him and meet him at the end of the game, he is the final boss. Well, aside from the twist in there, but narratively, he is the person who is willing to even sacrifice his humanity in order to stop you. And all of that is for a reason, to save his country. And you cannot blame him for any measure he goes to. And he goes to a lot of extreme measures. Genichiro is just generally one of the most balanced and impressive characters in the whole series. He has an amazing character arc, amazing presence in the story, and he is the main rival of the wolf. He's the peak of Sekiro's combat, and Inner Genichiro expands on that. Number 12. Knight Artorias. Does Knight Artorias provide better combat than Genichiro, Midir, or Soul of Cinder? No. Does he have better graphics, or is he technically more impressive than any of the people I mentioned so far? No. Remember the theme of this fallen and corrupted legend we went over when I talked about Martyr Larus and then later with General Radan? See, Artorias is that theme. He is the theme itself. If this list was a top 20 characters, Artorias would be number 3 or something. See, I just love this guy, that's it. It's simple, really. I love everything about him. I love his lore, I love his story, I love his design. I love the twist of the fake legend, of how he is not this legendary figure. He did not do all of those legendary facts. Yet, thousands of years later, his impact is still felt. I love these games for how amazing Miyazaki and the team are at storytelling, at understanding history, archaeology, and mythology. Life and myth are not written facts that everyone sees the same. And a huge part for why I love these games more than just combat and challenge is lore. And true lore, not just inner game lore, but rather inspirations and a lot of impressive things whenever you dive towards them. Artorias is just a beacon, a symbol of all of that. I feel like he embodies the style of Miyazaki more than any character we've ever seen or heard about. Cryptic storytelling, symbolizing chaotic beauty. I am currently and have been working on my own world, on my own fictional story. Currently writing my first book and story from those worlds. And one of my favorite characters so far is heavily inspired by Artorias. If there is a fictional character that inspired me the most, aside from Guts, it's Artorias. So yeah, just as a poetic and storytelling aspect, for someone like me who really values that, Artorias was a no doubt, and I really wanted him to be on the top 10 list. The competition is just that high. Number 11, we have Sister Freda. Freda, or even Sister Friend. However you pronounce her name, this is like easily one of the best boss fights. I would be surprised if everyone made a top 20 list and this is not in it. It would be shocking. It's the perfect balance between challenge and fairness, fire and ice, slow and fast, big and small. It's just balanced. A 3-phase boss fight, and every phase is distinct and stands out, up to the last one of them, which is just pure spectacle. Lady Maria 2.0, and I would never complain about that. To be honest, there is nothing more I can say about this fight. It's just perfect. It's simply perfect. I enjoy and love the upcoming fights even more, and that's why they are the top 10. We actually made it to the top 10, so everyone from now on is really the closest thing to perfection I can think when it comes to these games. Also, this ranking is so hot. Check on me a week after this video is uploaded and you'd probably find me bashing my head against a wall because I want to change some of these decisions. These are constantly changing, even if I don't replay any of these games, and if I do, then you'd guess what would happen. So we're sticking with this for now. Number 10, Melenia, Blade of Miquella. Look, I killed Melenia in 7 tries, and I know that's a big achievement, but after fighting her a lot of times, I can finally understand why she is, well, objectively up there as the hardest boss of these games, like the true hardest boss, mechanically speaking. Even some aspects of the fight might seem unfair, like why does she heal on hits, and the almost unescapable attack, never-ending aggression in phase 2, Scarlet Trot, the Bloom. It's just crazy, all of it. Like, she has a lot of things to adapt to. Over my first playthroughs of the game, Melenia wasn't all that. My favorite bosses were other bosses from Elden Ring. Melenia didn't really stand out for me. She was just the boss everyone is talking about, but I couldn't see why. Well, she beat everyone on Earth, like at least a few hundred times, that's why. But quality-wise, like, is Melenia really one of the best bosses? Not just hardest bosses or bullshit bosses, like actual quality. And now I get it. Melenia is a really, really good boss. And trust me, the amount of ways I found to trivialize this fight, to absolutely destroy her, are endless. I'll probably make a top 20 ways to bully Melenia. That's its own video. But recently, I've been fighting her with a very weak weapon, trying to absolutely nail her. And I'm talking about parrying. Parrying Melenia is a nightmare, but I am starting to get there. I got about like 70% of her moves. And I'm currently doing my first ever level 1 run. I stream every Friday and Sunday, by the way, if you want to tune in and say hi. But we're doing level 1. And yes, I will go to Melenia and try to kill her through parrying and a dagger. I might lose my sanity, but here I am talking about it before it happens. But seriously though, Melenia is a really good fight. She's always challenging. Well, if you don't break the fight, she kind of is fair considering, yes, she heals on hit, but also she's easy to stagger. She's not immune to a lot of things like cold, bleed, and even scarlet rot. Anyone who really complains about her being a bad boss or just, I mean, like I said earlier, just get good. Oh man, I'm probably pissing so many people off at this rate. But hey, I'm not an expert at these games, okay? I did clarify that earlier. If you clicked on this video, you're in for it. You did not sign up for an expert or someone who's trying to sound like an expert talking about this mechanic and moveset. Bro, I don't know that shit, okay? This guy is fucking cool, therefore I love him. And that's exactly number 9 on the list. Malekith, the Black Blade. Where do I even start? First of all, this was my favorite Elden Ring boss for the first year. It's been 2 years, so the first one of those, Malekith, was my number 1. But 2 bosses were able to surpass him after I replayed the game 27 billion times. But still, being my 3rd favorite boss from Elden Ring, which is probably my favorite game of all time at this rate, really says a lot. What is it that's not perfect about Malekith? Like, he has my 2nd best cutscene in all of video games. The transition from Gurranq to Malekith. And let's talk about Gurranq. The first phase is a really high quality boss on its own. He's really balanced, gives you a lot of ways to punish him, and you cannot just get greedy with him. You kinda have to give him the Dark Souls patient treatment, which fits so well with this beast. But once he pulls out that legendary blade, which is literally death itself, this guy pulls out death to kill you with it. Amazing presentation and easily my favorite and coolest looking moveset in all of the game. Not only does he absolutely make use of the arena like nothing we've seen before, but the fast pace, ranged and up close, the acrobatic movements of his, it's just so overwhelming, but also really just spectacular. You have to really get to the point when you can consistently get past Gurranq in the first phase to really make the most when you get to his true form. My only complaint is that he should have had 2 full health bars, man. Like, imagine Gurranq, maybe with a slight variation of moveset, like 2 to 3 other combo variations, and you'd have a full health bar, and then you get to Malekith again. A different cutscene, an entirely new phase. I'm pretty sure he'd be the hardest boss in Elden Ring, because most people I see say he is the 2nd hardest next to Melenia, and he has like the quarter of her health. Still though, I love everything about Malekith. Absolutely everything. His weapon, his design, his voice actor, his moveset. Number 8, completing the 3 entry into the top 10, which is all dominated by Elden Ring, we have Radagon of the Golden Order. When I think about Elden Ring, I think about Radagon. Like, yes, I wish the Elden Beast also did not exist. Although I do enjoy the Elden Beast, like I actually think it's a really good boss fight. Yes, it's tiring to run all over the place trying to catch up to him. Elden Stars is probably the worst thing to deal with in the game, but Elden Beast on its own is a really good boss and is actually fitting of being a final boss. If only we had context to him. We should have heard about him, we should have seen him or met him, I don't know, we should have kinda knew who the Elden Beast is before we met him. Just like we knew who Radagon was. Everyone knew Radagon was the 2nd Elden Lord. He's this monster, he's the big man in control now, and meeting him makes sense. So let's talk about him first. Again, everyone from now on I'm just gonna call it perfect in terms of moveset, because they really are. Radagon reminds me of the Elden Ring, not only because he literally has it inside of him, but also the soundtrack, which has become a main theme in my life. I never get tired of fighting him, and he's always a reason for me to push through the game, to finish it, to fight Radagon. And I always savor the fight, and save it to last as long as it should have. Now let's just fantasize. Imagine we keep the phase 1 Radagon, and phase 2 is the Elden Beast, but phase 3, Radagon comes back and kills the Elden Beast or whatever, and uses the Elden Beast as a weapon, like the Sacred Relic Sword should have been reversed, and we get a 3rd phase, like prime Radagon, not the shattered one, not the destroyed one. And it's just the most epic thing ever. Bro, you'll see me floating out there. You will not catch me if that happened. But it did not happen. So I will not leave a negative tone when I'm talking about Radagon, but yeah, still, my second favorite Elden Ring boss, and for a time was my favorite. Speaking of final bosses, number 7, Gman, the first hunter. See, Bloodborne is my all-time favorite game, and Gman is a beacon of that game in my mind. Gman is possibly the closest boss to perfection on this list. Music, 10 out of 10. Presentation, 10 out of 10. Lore and story, characterization, 30,000 billion out of 10. In every other aspect, even down to gameplay. The one thing that holds Gman back and is not making him my favorite boss of all time is the challenge. See, Gman is not the hardest boss. He will whip your ass like a few times first time you fight him, but on the other playthroughs, not so much. And challenge is something I consider for the criteria of this ranking. But generally though, I love this old guy. I will never forget his lines in his cutscene, the poetic presentation of the hunter's dream, down to the last boss fight being in it as a hub. Trust me, I can talk about this guy for 3 hours, just him alone, and I would still fail to capture what makes him such an amazing boss. And specifically to me, I would still be unable to find the words to describe that first playthrough and that first final boss of Bloodborne. Number 6, Slave Knight Gale. Gale is the first perfect boss in my eyes. There is nothing that this boss doesn't have. Spectacle, check. Challenge, check. Lore, check. Music, absolutely. Arena, outstanding. And just the idea of two nobodies fighting at the end of time and the end of world, the end of the Dark Souls series, the whole, everything about Gale is just perfect. And trust me, just like all of the list, all of this ranking was very hard, especially that Gale for a long time was my second to third favorite boss. He's never dropped this low. But this is just how I feel right now. Slave Knight Gale is basically Soul of Cinder on steroids. That idea of the final boss that wraps up the series, but executed on a much bigger scale and feels like the ultimate Dark Souls boss. Number 5, Lady Maria. I can already see the people running to the comment section accusing me of blasphemy. How come I put Gale under Maria? See, I love Gale, and we've talked about him, but I love Maria more. It's simple. Also, the only thing that is possibly a big criticism of Lady Maria as a boss is the difficulty. And by that I mean the ability to just consistently and easily parry her. Then I suggest a challenge to you, Mr. Difficult. How about you just don't parry her? I first thought about that my last time I played Bloodborne, and it just made this boss 10 times harder. Just stop spamming L1 and try to beat her melee only. It's a weird thing, I know, but if it's for the sake of prolonging something I love, then I will do it, and I did it. Everything I said about Gman and Artorias applies to Maria. Maria just has some of the best lore out there, and she started this trend of the hard, absolutely sexy female boss that Sister Freda and Melenia and even Emma are all clones of. Maria started that trend, but again, Bloodborne's DLC is possibly the best thing ever made, and Lady Maria is a masterpiece within that, which speaks a lot. This video is already way longer than I anticipated, so I'm not gonna dive into why Maria is such a good boss. I'll just give her a 10 out of 10 in everything, even combat and challenge, especially if you don't parry her, and I highly recommend it for your next playthrough. And at number 4, our second Sekiro boss, Inner Father. Again, just like Genichiro, Father Owl alone would have made it pretty high on this list, but Inner Father is just an update, an upgrade to that fight. As if it needed it. This fight is almost perfect. Mechanically speaking, this and maybe one of the upcoming fights are the best bosses in all of the Souls games. This fight took me the most time to actually master the boss. In my first playthrough of Sekiro, I had one simple rule, that I do not go to sleep until I kill whatever boss I was at. And I was very successful with it, considering that Orin of the Water is somehow the boss that killed me the most in Sekiro. Father Owl was the man that actually made me feel sleepy. I remember being frustrated and fed up and kind of angry of how hard the fight is, even though I thought I got it. I thought I finally got the Sekiro parry. I got into the flow and rhythm of it all. I closed the game and went to my bed to sleep, but then I got up and I was like, no, I'm beating this motherfucker tonight. 3 to 5 tries in, I beat him. But that random and funny story aside, Inner Father is just Father but with more moves. And I feel like he is the most underrated major boss in all of the games. From being overwhelmed and almost ruining my record of not going to sleep before I beat the Sekiro boss, on every playthrough, this guy just gets way more points on my list. And thanks to Sekiro's Remembrance and Gauntlet system, I can just turn on the game and hop on a fight with Inner Father or Inner Genichiro, and I still feel that challenge and enjoy the fight anytime I do. Number 3. Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. See, for the last 2 years, I've been extremely addicted to this game, and my favorite boss changed every few months, from Malekith to Radagon to Mohg, and now to Godfrey. Godfrey is a very hard boss fight, but not on the level of Gale and Inner Father. If you fight him enough times, you get into the rhythm of his fight and you can read his movements very easily. Dodging through his attacks and into any of his sides makes everything else easy. So if you want another recommendation like with Lady Maria, dodge backwards. Yeah, roll backwards or just stay in front of him. The fight will stay harder and you'll get the challenge, if that's what you want. That's what I've been doing whenever I fought Godfrey lately, and I enjoy the fight even more. For now at least, he's the Elden Ring boss that I enjoy the most, and that's why he is my favorite Elden Ring boss and the third on this list. And number 2, we have Ludwig, the Holy Blade. For the longest, this was my all-time favorite boss. It was not even close. Seriously though, what am I supposed to say about this guy? That the 1000 Mojo type channels that makes videos of this type have already said. He has the best piece of music in the entire series, and he possibly has the best characterization, the best portrayal of whatever Miyazaki and the studio cooked up with this guy. The symbolism, the tragedy, the chaos, and the beauty of this encounter. And gameplay-wise, you fight a husk, a monster. His moveset doesn't make any sense physically. It's all over the place and the music feels unorganized. It's all so intense. An amazing beast type boss and definitely one of the best. But all of that changes once the best cutscene plays out. Single-handedly one of, if not the most iconic lines of dialogue in the whole game. All while the music eerily builds up and switches and organizes itself in the background as he pulls out the most iconic Souls weapon that appears in every single game, but here in its purest and most popular form, wielded by the one and only legendary figure known as Ludwig. And I don't even know if it's really intended to be pronounced as Ludwig, but I live in Germany now, so I'm calling him Ludwig. Anyways, you are treated to a respectable fight, a duel of what feels like a champion finally regaining his consciousness and his senses. A very challenging fight that ends with one of the best interactions in the whole game, the way he asks you the question that I do not think I've met anyone who dared to lie to him about his hunters and about his legacy. It just feels wrong, but this fight is a masterpiece. But we're at number 1, and you probably guessed it already. Isen, the Sword Saint. See, Isen only excels at one thing more than Ludwig and Godfrey, and that's his moveset. First of all, this is a 4-phase boss fight. You fight the strongest version of Genichiro at first, and then you fight Isen in basically 2 different phases, where he is passive at first, simply dodging around and slightly attacking with short combos, to turning up a notch and pulling out this glaive or across Naginata from the ground, altering his playstyle and chasing you around. And he also has a gun. If I were to zone in on combat and on mechanics, Isen and by far is the boss that gets me excited the most and is the fight that I enjoy the most. And it helps that it's a really long fight, but it's the fight that I feel like I tap into the flow state. I have to be better than this guy to beat him, and it needs all of my focus. Again, Inner Isen is basically just a slight upgrade, but I don't feel it's that much, or at least not as much as Father and Genichiro, to choose it over just the base final boss of the game. I'm still waiting for the day that From Software and the future Souls games somehow surpass this guy. That is why I am dying for excitement for the Elden Ring DLC, because we all know the DLC is the best content out there, which frankly speaking all the more adds more points to Isen, because he feels like a perfect DLC boss. It makes no sense that this guy is in the base game. But that's it for me today. Subscribe for more, tune into the live streams every Friday and Sunday if you're interested in the. See ya in the next one.